Hey guys, this is Tech It Out, and today we are going to be upgrading the mid-2011 iMac CPU to an Intel Core i7. So, let's get started. So now you need to start by putting one suction cup on the left corner of the glass and one suction cup on the right corner of the glass. Then with both hands, pull on both suction cups and pull the glass out and up. So now you are going to need some needle nose pliers and a 6-pin screwdriver. And now we're going to need to unscrew the 4 screws on the left side of the LCD and the 4 on the right, being as careful as possible not to touch the LCD. I would also recommend wearing gloves to help ensure that you don't get handprints on the LCD, because handprints are very hard to get off. So now we need to pull the LCD out of the iMac. I would recommend leaning it back so it doesn't fall out. So there are 2 cables on the left side of the LCD and 2 on the right. So as you can see, there's one cable there that should just pop off. There's one cable there and one cable right there. Okay, so there was actually a cable that plugged in right here as well. Now we need to unscrew these 2 screws for the hard drive. Now go ahead and disconnect the SATA and power connectors from the hard drive. You have now removed the hard drive. Okay, so now we need to go ahead and remove these 3 screws. So they're just a Phillips head, so go ahead and remove them. So now you need to go ahead and hold the Mac with one hand and then pull down on the tab with one hand. Now you're gonna have to pull kind of hard, but the stick of memory should come out. So there's one. Then let me get this other one. And there's the other 2. Okay, so now I need to start by removing all the cables, and starting with these 3, then doing these 4 right here. Then we need to do these 2. And then there are 2 down here by the fan, and there's this one right here, and you'll have to remove the tape. So let's go ahead and remove those. Okay, so now you want to go ahead and remove this screw. Okay. Now you want to remove this screw. This screw. This screw. Now you want to go ahead and remove this screw. And now you want to go ahead and remove these 4 screws. Now you can just pull it back. So now you can just pull this fan up and out of the way. Okay, so you're also going to need to unscrew this screw right here. And then you need to unscrew this screw right here. So now this cable we need to pull up on, if you can see that down there. So we're gonna have to pull up this little piece of tape, and you need to pull up on the IR chip so that it comes out like this. So we also need to unplug this cable here by squeezing the outside of it, and it should come out just like that. Now very carefully we are going to have to unstick the cable from the motherboard. Okay, so now we need to take off these 4 bolts for the power supply. Now you're going to need to remove this piece of tape here, and now we should be able to pull up on the power supply. Okay, so now on the back side of the PS power supply, you'll have this clip that you'll need to push, and then start wiggling this big connector till it comes undone. And then you've got another small clip over here, same deal, squeeze the clip, pull it out. So now we need to remove this screw here. So go ahead and unscrew that, but make sure not to lose this. So these 3 wires can pop off, actually. These 3 can pop off, but I find it easiest not to pop those off, because then I have to remember which one goes where. So the chip just slides out just like that. So now we should be able to pull up on the motherboard just like this. And once you get to this point, you will see some cables hanging on to the back of the motherboard. So as you can see, there are some cables connected here on the back that we need to disconnect. So we'll see. It looks like there's about 4. So these are, I believe these are power connectors. So go ahead and pop these out of place. So there's 2 about right here, and then 2 over here. So now with those released, and we should hopefully be able to pull out this dang motherboard. So now just note, when you are handling the motherboard, to be extremely gentle as you can crack it. So here's the bottom of it. So I'm going to be upgrading the CPU, so let's get to it. I'm just going to go ahead and unplug this little chip here, so just to make it easier. So go ahead and unplug that. Make sure not to lose any of these small parts. So now to perform this CPU upgrade, you are going to need your 5-pin screwdriver, and we are going to have to unscrew these 4 screws on the bottom of the CPU. Ignore me using the Phillips screwdriver to hold the Phillips screws still. You will not need to do that. Just unscrew the 4 on the bottom with the 5-pin. So I do recommend keeping your screws organized, as it will help you. So let's keep going. So now we've got to unscrew this screw right here. We got to unscrew that screw. So now we should be able to pull our CPU core off. Okay, so once you get this off for your CPU replacement, you want to go ahead and clean off most of the old thermal paste. Now we should be able to go straight to getting the motherboard ready, but make sure you have a clean space to work on. So now you need to push down and out on the CPU socket arm, and that should allow the CPU socket cover to open up. So now I've got my Intel Core i7-2600S ready to go. That's the processor I will be replacing, and we need to very gently take the Core i5 out of your iMac. Then put the Core i7 or your upgraded processor into the iMac very gently in the same orientation, but do not push down when you set the processor in the socket. Just set it in there. Now it is time to close the socket, so you have to push the socket arm down and then over to the right. Do not be afraid, you will have to apply some pressure. It is completely normal to have to actually push on it. You are not going to damage the CPU. So now we need to make sure that our CPU is clean so we can put on our thermal paste, which you can buy from Amazon or eBay. So all you need to do is put about a dot in the middle of the CPU of thermal paste. It doesn't take much at all. So now it is time to put on your CPU core. Now when you push down on the CPU, try to push down as evenly as possible so that the thermal paste spreads evenly. So now we need to go ahead and screw down the CPU cooler. So go ahead and put in your first screw here. But don't screw the screw all the way down immediately. You need to screw them in a cross pattern so you can screw the CPU core down evenly so it has equal pressure on the CPU. Okay, so once that is tight, you are done with the motherboard. So now it is time for reassembly of the iMac. So first I'm going to plug in the IR chip to the motherboard. So now this wire, this, and these two wires need to plug in to the back of your motherboard. So they're going to plug in. One is going to plug in right here on this connector. One is going to plug in here. One is going to plug in here. And one is going to plug in here. So this wire does go in like this, in this orientation. Almost looks like it's facing backwards, but it is not. Okay, so once your motherboard is connected, make sure that any wires are out of the way that need to plug in on the other side. So any wires that need to plug in on this side of the motherboard, make sure that they are out of the way. So, and make sure this DVD drive cable comes back that way under the motherboard this direction. So, and I almost forgot to plug in the GPU or CPU temperature, so make sure to plug that in. Make sure everything is plugged in on your motherboard. Okay, so now your motherboard is back in place. Okay, so actually before you put your motherboard completely back in place, you need to get your super drive and make sure that the wire can go under the motherboard and come out by the CPU fan so it can plug in the correct spot without having to go over the motherboard. Now if you leave out the step, that will be okay. You will be able to run it over the motherboard, but it is best to run it under the motherboard. So now we need to go ahead and plug in the IR chip. Now it goes in at kind of like this. It may take you a few minutes to figure out how exactly to fit it in. It may take some fiddling around with it, but it will go in, and there's only one way for it to fit in, and you'll know when it does. Next, we need to go ahead and plug in this audio cable, and it goes in just like this. And once you've plugged it in, you need to go ahead and rub your hand around the rubber just to help it stick down to the motherboard so it's not flopping around in your iMac. So now we just need to pop in this little chip just like this and screw in its screw. Then we need to go ahead and screw in the screw for the GPU heatsink. So now we need to install the power supply. So first we need to go ahead and plug in the two wires that connect to the power supply. And then we need to get this plastic piece ready and make sure that you orient it right and get it to where it goes under these two wires, but then the small wire going to the power supply can go under it as well. Okay, so I messed up with the DVD drive. I accidentally pulled the wire out from under the motherboard, so I'll just make it go across. It'll be okay that way. So now let's go ahead and screw in our fan. So first of all, it has to plug in, and it's going to plug in down here, right here on this connector. As you can see, it says odd fan on it, literally. So we're going to go ahead and plug that in first. And it only goes in one way, so if it doesn't go in, then you got it the wrong way. So now this wire has to go under this little crease almost like thing right here. So the wire has to go through here just like that. Okay, so let's go ahead and put down the fan. Make sure these wires are able to get to, because you will need them to plug in later. So this wire will go behind this post here and through the crack on the fan, just like that. And once it is down, now you can plug in this wire over here. This is to your SD card reader. So if you want an SD card reader, I recommend plugging this wire in. So make sure that's nice and tight and secure. Okay, so now once that is in, we're going to plug in these three wires. So starting with the smallest, it goes in right here. Just like that. Now this one, and this one. And now we need to go ahead and screw in the fan. Okay, so now let's go ahead and get our disk drive in. So I'm gonna plug in just like this. Okay, and then it just slides down like that. Then you can hopefully pop these in. So, as you can see, now I have the DVD drive in. Okay, so now let's get the 4 screws in. We've got our thickest screw. The widest head screw will go on the bottom left. So okay, so now we just gotta screw in the logic board screws and then hook up the rest of the connections. So we got this screw, this screw, this screw, and this screw. So the 2 longer ones are going to go on your more left screws, and then the shorter ones will go down there. So let's see if this screwdriver's gonna work for these. Okay, it will. Okay, so now that our logic board screws are in, let's start plugging things back up. So we've got this little bitty connector. Took me a while to get off. Goes in just like this. Okay, that one goes there. This one goes here. Okay, this one here, and then this DVD plug, or DVD temperature sensor, I believe goes here. Okay, and then we can screw in, or push in these two cables. Okay, so now it is time to install our SSD. Now, some people think that you need to have a 3.5-inch adapter for 2.5-inch SSDs. I did not buy one, so what I'm going to do is just double-side tape the SSD to the logo here. So now I would recommend laying your iMac down because it is time to install the LCD. So we have a connection here, 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 and here. And I would also recommend wearing gloves just to help prevent fingerprints from getting on the LCD. So now you need to stick in the LCD just like this, and then I'm going to turn my iMac around just because it will be easier for me to work on that way. So now it's time to plug in the 4 cables of the LCD. So once everything is plugged in, I would make sure to double check them all, but then you can go ahead and lay your LCD down. So now once your LCD is fully plugged in, it's time to screw in the 4 screws on both sides of the LCD. But also be careful to watch out for those magnets. I would recommend having your needle nose pliers nearby because magnets will take your screws from you. Okay, so once you are done screwing on your LCD, you can go ahead and grab the glass. It is magnetic at the top, so you just slide it in the bottom and then it will pop on at the top, and then you can pull your suction cups off and you are good to go. So thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. And if you feel like being extra awesome, go ahead and hit that like button. As usual, if you have any questions or comments, leave them down in the comments below, and I will try to get to them as soon as I can. I'll catch you in the next video. Peace.